Okay, much more interesting to me than the question of is the will free and is it not free over and over. It's just how it works. Even the people that think it's not free, um, even the people that think it's not free, use it every day, admit they use it every day. So just let's discuss how it works a little bit. Okay, one problem I have with not discussing it is that you have people like Galen Strawson, evidently a respected philosopher on this subject, who has this infantile view of how the process works, this organization. If we're going to describe the mind, we need a description of the elements of the process of programming it, right? We have flexibility in the different ideas that we have. We need to understand those as a kind of a program, a language, if you will, for describing a system of thinking, right? And we separate that, and then there's hardware which has built in certain things like you would have in such a language, such as variables and actions you can take on those variables, and the variables are of certain fundamental types, and in our case they would be types like a feeling and a perception, an image perception, a sound perception, and so on and so forth. Okay, the unification of these things, and yes, I'm using a thinking machine brings in computer metaphor. I will justify that. I'm sure I will be challenged on that, and if not, then you guys are not very good at challenging ideas because obviously that should be challenged. But I warn you, I'm prepared to discuss the limitations and powers of computer metaphors on the mind. But be that as it may, fundamentally, if the mind is an object-oriented language of some sort with the types, uh, with a proper kind of a type system and clean typing, then I don't know if it's definitely probably not strict typing, but there's some sort of a typing. Well, it's going to be good to find out what is your most general, what is shared among all of the elements in the mind. And the answer to that, I don't think is even very complicated once you think it over. And it's because it's perceptions. Everything is perceptions. Now, perceptions themselves, all the differences in the mind, all the different peculiarities, evolutionary peculiarities, particular things, like we have these kinds of eyes. We wouldn't have them if we were another kind of animal. So we have a data type, so-called, for variables in the mind, that's a visual image with color like a human experiences. Okay, so there's a lot of feature that inside perception, but they're all perceptions. The two big categories for perceptions are perceptions of imagery and perceptions of motor function, of doing something. Because the motor function is one where we really feel like we're willing. And we talk about the illusion of free will. It goes both ways. This is why it's a much more important set of questions below the surface than everybody seems to debate. Because, look, in the imagery side of things, we think we don't have free will. We just see what really is. Well, we're wrong. We're recreating that, and we have a lot of free will in how the images look. Tons. We need to admit that we have more will there than we think, than we intuitively think. On the motor side and what we do with our body, we feel and assume, oh, we're just totally free and we decided. Well, there we have to realize, no, actually we have less freedom than we thought there. We have ideas out of balance. The thing is off kilter. You can take that back into balance and realize how much will is in image making and how much determinism is in motor function. But all right, so now maybe the motor function perceptions should not be called perceptions, they should be called something else. But I'm sure we can talk about them and abstractly categorize them as perceptions. Why? Because we only know about them because of perceptions. So even though we will, and maybe there's something fundamental to that we'll dig down to eventually, there is a unity at the perceptive level, because you can will yourself to move, and if you couldn't tell if your body was moving, it wouldn't be a complete, you wouldn't experience it as well. So we know that by the time you experience it, it's been transformed into a perception. It might be something else. But then, again, perceptions, the regular image produced perceptions coming from the senses in the epitome case, those also are generated from something else, that are transformed. So the whole world made of all these different things, we don't know. Does it unify into one, or is there multiple? It wouldn't necessarily matter, because we're not relying on that. Well, it would matter, but it wouldn't matter in terms of taking things in terms of perception, because it's not that perception is the bottom fundament. Some people want to say that. I don't know that in nature, and I don't need to. I know it's the bottom fundament for me, and by the time I am involved with something, thinking-wise and thinking it, then it has been transformed into a perception. So the basic variable type, the basic, the root node of the hierarchy of types in this mind language is going to be perceptions. Then we have lots of different perceptions. So for example, people have wants. Okay, I prefer to call it desires, whatever. Wants and desires to me are distinct. A want I can talk about later exactly what a want means, what kind of expression of a desire it is, and also I just think there's a negative want. People just always want so much they need to realize things rather than want them. But anyway, those are kinds of, you can have a want that's a variable of type 1. It's somewhere else in the type hierarchy. Now, I am not searching for the total fundaments. I think that if I made 100 systems that all could work the mind, they could all seem very different. Okay, every philosophy, when you make a philosophy that's an actual worldview that you can act on, unlike the unfree will philosophy, which you obviously can't act on because there's no acting in it. So, if you have that kind of philosophy, then you are changing your reactions in the world. That is, the philosophy itself is your will. It's a pattern for your will. So we have so much flex. Other animals don't seem to have as much flexibility. We have a tremendous flexibility in the shape of our will, because every philosophy is a different shape for a will. Yeah, there's probably some energy, the perceptions, pouring through this matrix, but the shape of the matrix affects how it works. So making a philosophy, is like creating a certain structure of will. If will is the things I can do in my programming language to make this body do things, So, that picture is a little bit indirect, and I think that's pretty accurate to what chance we really have. So we're investigating it, and there's a lot of different systems, and you can change the way your will is shaped, but with some limits, like to the variable types. It's just like a program, There's so many different kinds of programs you can write on a Turing machine, okay? So many different kinds, right? It's limitless, okay? But they're all Turing machines. They're all using a Turing machine, And then there's certain elements of discreteness and things that get implied by a Turing machine. Okay, and so the limitations come out. So after you make 1,000 philosophies, yes, you're going to find that all of those philosophies use things like desires. But maybe some don't use wants. They cast desires differently. Maybe a want is a secondary idea. Yes, the desires are primal and real, but in reality, if you all the things we actually use day to day, those are abstractions on abstractions that we have some option. It's like you are going to be hungry, but how you think of food, that's an option, Whether you think of it spiritually, practically, materially, like water, different from water, what you do, okay, that might be different. So, yeah, the desires will create some patterns among all of these things, just like we have patterns of similarity between all the Turing machines. All these different programming languages, so different, yet they have some very fundamentally exactly the same features. Even when there's totally different languages, like functional languages, there's still some elements that they have in common, the basic elements of how the logic in a Turing machine works. Some of it goes all the way up and down, or up from the Turing machine's nature into any language built to program a Turing machine. We find the same thing in the human mind, okay, and I think you're going to find that those fundamentals in all of these systems are there's no reason to start with 50 things, I think it is. Perceptions, right? You're going to find sense and motor metaphors. Okay, so I just start with those two things. You're going to find perceptions and sense and motor metaphors.